Hello everyone and welcome back to the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. It's match 3 of the match Hikaru Nakamura versus Magnus Carlsen. Sorry about no videos yesterday, I had to go to a party at my nephew's, but I mentioned I will not be making any videos yesterday. So we're now going to check what happened in the third match, so whoever wins this one proceeds to the finals of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge to face Daniil Dubov in the finals. In the first match, Magnus defeated Hikaru 3-0. Then in the second match, Hikaru retaliated by a half-a-point margin. He won the by a full-point margin. He won the first match and then the first game, and then drew the next 3. So he took the match, and now we have the second game of the third match. So first game ended in a draw, and this is the second game where Hikaru has the white pieces. And it's, again, quite the game. It's really a very, very long theoretical struggle, so it's going to be a while since we have a completely new game. So Hikaru opens with e4, like he did in so many other games against Magnus. e5, knight f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board. And I mentioned in, I think in the previous video where we had the Berlin defense, that so many games today that come from the Berlin are really super interesting, and that it's not like, you know, in the old days when you had the Berlin and it was super boring. But here Magnus instead goes for a6, Morphy's defense, and we're going to have a different kind of game. So bishop back to a4, and now knight to f6. So continuing in the fashion of Morphy's defense, we have castles, and now knight captures on e4. We have d4 by Hikaru. This is the standard variation. We have b5, bishop to b3, and now d5, defending that knight on e4, and now white just wins back the pawn. So d captures on e5, and bishop to e6, now adding another defender to the d5 pawn. We have queen to e2, freeing up the d1 square for the rook, and now bishop to e7. We have rook to d1 by Hikaru. Now the rook and queen are on the same file, so basically what you're doing is you're preparing c4. We have castles, and Hikaru goes for c4 right away. And this is the most often played move here. This is nothing new. So b captures, bishop captures, and now bishop to c5. As the rook to d1 was played, now the f2 pawn is weak, so Magnus goes for it. With bishop to e3 defending, and here Magnus trades. We have captures, captures, and queen to b8, now going after the b2 pawn, but also now the queen is no longer on d8, so you introduce the threat of d captures on c4. So Nakamura deals with both threats, with bishop to b3, defending the bishop and the b2 pawn, and now knight to a5, going after that bishop, with knight to d4 by Hikaru, now defending the bishop and also attacking the bishop on e6. And here Magnus forces the trade with c5, pretty much forcing knight captures on e6, which Hikaru goes for. We have f captures on e6, and now f3, saying that your knight has nowhere to go since all of these squares are covered. And if you don't want to lose the knight, you have to make room for the knight. So here c4 instead, attacking the bishop, and like I said, this has all been played before by some very, very strong players. So here we have a trade, f captures on e4, c captures on b3, we have e captures on d5, b captures on a2, threatening to pick up the knight here. So rook captures on a2, and now as the knight here is under attack, knight to c4, attacking the queen, and also there is now a double attack on the b2 pawn here. So queen d4, attacking and defending, and now comes queen to b3, now putting pressure on the rook. And it's a very dangerous position, but it has been reached before plenty of times, and well, you have to be a little bit careful. For example, your rook is under attack. If you just move the rook, then you have ideas like rook to f4, trying to deflect the queen from the defense of the rook on d1, and the black will just gain a lot of activity here. So Hikaru goes for the absolute best move, which is knight to c3. Now defends this rook. This rook is nicely defended, so it's not a problem. And here, usually what players with the black pieces do here is go rook 8 to c8, and this happened in a lot of notable games like Wei Yi against Vidit, for example, Caruana against Giri. All of them played rook to c8 here, but here Magnus instead goes for the pawn. He plays knight captures on b2 and attacks the rook here on c1, and the move has never been played before, so it is as of move 23 that we have a completely new game. That's why I said it was sort of a long theoretical struggle. And now Magnus tries this idea, which was not attempted before. So the rook is under attack. Rook to b1 places a double attack on the knight here, and now Magnus just moves the queen to c4 while attacking Hikaru's queen, so offering a trade. And if the trade happens, then the knight captures and everything is fine. So Hikaru goes for it. We have queen captures, knight captures, and now d captures on e6, grabbing that pawn. And now Magnus doesn't go for the pawn right away. He instead goes rook to f5. He wants to pick up the pawn with the rook and immediately put a rook behind the passed pawn. So Hikaru goes knight to d5, and only now Magnus captures it. Rook captures on e5, but here he allows Hikaru a very nice tactic. So feel free to pause the video and try to figure out what would be good for white here. What would you play here with white? Well, I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the tactic. And also, if you've noticed the title, there are some back rank issues at hand here. So for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's rook captures on a6. Point being that if you capture the rook, rook to b8 is checkmate. The pawn covers the f7 square and the king has nowhere to go. So after this rook captures on a6 move, Magnus goes rook to e8, puts the other rook in front of the passed pawn. And now comes knight to c7 by Nakamura, attacking Carlsen's rook, also defending the e6 pawn once again. And it's a very interesting position because if rook to c8 or, for example, rook to f8, the game continues. However, Magnus played rook to d8 and this now completely loses the game. So once again, I will ask you to pause the video and try to find the winning move for Nakamura while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on once again exploiting the issue of the back rank. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's rook to c6. Rook to c6 with the idea of removing the defender of the d6 square. That's the point. And you have to move the knight. For example, if you defend the knight, then white can just pick it up, and after you capture it, e7 just wins the game. The d8 square is covered. Once you move, then just e8 queen, and that's it. You have to capture it, and the white is just up a full knight. You could try and play rook to c6 to kind of try and trap the knight. Let's say king f7 to trap the knight, but then rook to b7, and you will be able to easily escape with the knight. So it's not a problem. So after this rook to c6 move that Nakamura played, Magnus of course had to retreat. He played knight to e3, but now comes the main move. You remove the defender of the d6 square, and now rook to d6, again exploiting the back rank weaknesses. So this gives Hikaru enough time to push the pawn all the way to e7. So rook to c8, attacking the knight, and now rook to d7, defending the knight, and now e7 is coming, and there's nothing you can do about it. Magnus played h6, but now e7. Here king to h7, not allowing any rook to d8 check ideas, but now comes rook to e1. And after this rook to e1 move, it was in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. And the game 2 of their third match goes to Hikaru, who now takes the lead in the match, and the Magnus will have to win at least one game to get back into the match. So here you resign because there is no defense here. Whatever you do just loses. Let's say you have to make a move and there aren't all that many moves you can make. Let's say you try and waste the move. E8 queen just finishes the game. You're going to capture the queen, and after, let's say, knight captures, a rook will recapture, and then just rook d3 with a double attack on the knight, you lose this knight. That's the idea behind rook to e1. And even if you just trade off the rooks right away, let's say captures, you attack the rook here, then rook d8 just wins. It's not a problem. You can either capture here and then white gets a queen, or captures and then you get a queen into the game, and there is nothing more to be done here. If the knight was here instead of here, then it'd be good, because then you'd have like rook to c1 checkmate, since the knight from here would be covering the f2 square, but you don't. So that's too bad for Magnus. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Magnus will now have to win a game to get back into the match, so we'll also see what happens in the next 2 games. I would like to thank Abdullah Rajeh, Pierre Michel, Alex Gama, Erez Baruch, and William Spires for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.